All right, gamers, buckle up. Because today we are diving deep into the world of open world game design. I bet you've spent hours, maybe even days, lost in these massive digital playgrounds.
Definitely. Some of my best gaming memories are from just exploring in a huge open world.
Absolutely. So we're going to pull back the curtain and explore how these expansive worlds are made. We'll be taking a look at some specific techniques and examples from popular games. Games like The Crew 2, Spider-Man on the PS4, and even Fuel.
Yeah, those are some great choices. Each of them tackles the open world concept a little bit differently.
You got it. So consider this your mission briefing. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a better grasp of the challenges and creative solutions involved in making these believable open worlds. Who knows, maybe you'll get inspired to create your own.
I'm ready to dive in. Let's start with The Crew 2. This game basically crammed the entire USA into one giant map. You can race from coast to coast, across deserts, through cities, up mountains. I mean, it's insane how much ground they cover. How on earth did developers even begin to build something that huge?
I know, right? It's mind-boggling. My first time playing, I kept thinking, they made all of this by hand.
Well, that's where the magic of procedural generation comes in. It's actually pretty complicated to explain, but basically, instead of designing every single detail by hand, the developers use these algorithms, sort of like digital recipes, I guess you could say. They tell the computer how to generate all these different elements in the world automatically.
So it's kind of like they give the computer a set of rules and let it go wild, building the world based on those rules.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like they set some guidelines, like what kind of terrain they want, maybe how many roads they need, where they want some mountains, even things like how densely packed the cities are, and then the computer takes over and fills in the details.
That's wild. But it makes a lot of sense, I guess, if you want to create a world as huge as the Crew 2's, doing everything manually would take forever.
Oh yeah, it would be practically impossible. The Crew 2 is a fantastic showcase for procedural generation because it demonstrates how you can create this enormous map without sacrificing detail or diversity. I mean, you go from these bustling cityscapes to these vast deserts and snowy mountains. It's crazy.
And it feels pretty seamless. Like, I don't remember any loading screens between areas or anything like that.
That's right. That seamlessness is another advantage of using these techniques. It helps to maintain that sense of immersion,
Yeah.
like you're really driving across an entire continent.
Okay, so we've talked about wide open spaces, but what about the opposite? What about the super detailed environments like, say, a massive city? When I played Spider-Man on PS4, I was blown away by how real New York City felt. It wasn't just the swinging around, it was the crowds, the traffic. You really feel like you're in a living, breathing city.
Mm.
How do they pull that off?
So one thing that really stood out to me was this trick they use called fake interiors. When you're swinging through Manhattan, you see all these skyscrapers and you can look through the windows, right? You'd think you're seeing all these detailed offices and apartments.
Yeah, totally. I remember thinking how much work it must have been to model all those interiors.
Well, here's the catch. A lot of those are just facades, kind of like backdrops you'd see on a movie set.
Whoa, wait, seriously? It's all smoke and mirrors.
Basically, yeah. Imagine the resources it would take to render a full, detailed interior for every single skyscraper in Manhattan. It would be insane. So they create these very convincing facades that create the illusion of depth without killing the game's performance.
That's brilliant, honestly.
Huh.
It's a clever way to trick our brains into thinking we're seeing more than we actually are.
Definitely a great example of how developers have to be resourceful and find creative solutions to these challenges.
It's a good reminder that sometimes limitations can actually push creativity. Since we are on the topic of superhero cities, we have to mention Batman. Arkham City. I mean, Gotham City is just as iconic as Spider-Man's New York, but the feel of the open world in Arkham City is very different.
For sure, both Arkham City and Arkham Knight are amazing open world games, and Gotham feels huge, dark, and gritty. But yeah, if you compare it directly to Spider-Man's New York, there are some key differences. I think the most obvious is the scale.
Right. Gotham feels big, but not Spider-Man big. You can't really swing across the entire city like you can in Spider-Man.
Yeah, and that's not just a random decision. The design of the world is tied to the gameplay mechanics and the focus of the story. Spider-Man is all about that fast, fluid traversal, swinging through these massive canyons of skyscrapers. So they needed a world that felt vast and vertical. Batman, on the other hand, is more grounded. He glides, grapples, uses stealth a lot more. So Gotham, even though it's a big open world, feels denser, more tightly packed with a lot of verticality.
It's like each hero's city was tailor-made for their powers and their fighting style.
Right. It's not just about creating a big space. It's about creating the right kind of space, a space that supports the character, the gameplay, the story, It all has to work together.
That's a great point. It's really about designing the space with a purpose. Speaking of pushing boundaries, though, we have to talk about a game that took the concept of open world to a whole new level. Have you ever played Fuel?
Oh, Fuel. Yeah, the game is legendary for its size, right?
It holds the Guinness World Record for largest playable area in a video game. We're talking about a map that's over 5,500 square miles.
5,500 square miles. That's larger than some countries. It's mind-blowing just thinking about the amount of data involved in creating a world that size.
And it's not just empty space either. It's filled with canyons, mountains, forests, lakes, ruined cities. The variety is incredible.
I bet they used procedural generation on a massive scale for that game.
You bet they did. But even procedural generation has its limits, especially with a map that huge. To deal with the sheer amount of data, Fuel used another clever trick called streaming technology. Basically, imagine your computer only loading the parts of the world you can actually see at any given time. It's like having a giant digital map that only loads the details you need, right when you need them.
That's smart. It's like selective rendering, right? Only showing you what's necessary to maintain the illusion of a fully realized world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a bit like how our brains work. We don't focus on every single detail in our surroundings all at once. And with a map the size of Fuel's, that kind of optimization is absolutely essential. Otherwise, you'd need a supercomputer just to run the game.
Right. And even beyond the technical challenges, I'm curious about the artistic side of it. Designing a world that vast must have been a huge artistic undertaking. Think about how much variety you need to prevent it from feeling repetitive.
Oh, absolutely. The developers had to come up with all sorts of creative ways to keep the world interesting and diverse. Different biomes, weather effects, dynamic events, landmarks, and even subtle details like variations in vegetation and rock formations. It's a testament to their dedication to making the world feel truly alive and worth exploring.
I can't even imagine the amount of work that went into it. It's inspiring, really, to see how developers can push the boundaries of what's possible in a video game.
It really is. And, after exploring all these different techniques, I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no single right way to build an open world. It all depends on the goals of the game, the style of gameplay, the story you want to tell. Each game finds its own unique solution.
I agree. And that's what makes it so exciting. There's so much room for experimentation and innovation. It's not just about making a bigger world, it's about making a better world, a world that's engaging and fun and memorable.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, to our listeners, I hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the artistry and technology behind those open worlds you love exploring. But here's a thought. What kind of open world would you create? A sprawling galaxy? A fantasy kingdom? A post-apocalyptic wasteland? What unique challenges might you face, and what clever solutions could you come up with? Let your imaginations run wild because the possibilities are endless.
And maybe someday we'll be diving deep into your amazing open world game. Keep creating and keep exploring.
You got it. Until next time, keep on gaming.
See you in the next deep dive.